whatever I'm doing. And because a compliment goes a long way, and it doesn't have to be a dramatic compliment, nor does it need to be something that's deep and just something that just something that's nice and sort of a smile and say something nice. Whether it's something like you look nice today or thank you for helping me here, I appreciate it so much. And so being considerate, complimenting, and being cautious are the three C's I will say to think about being being three C's of leadership. But one of the experiences I heard that I had that I shared with you briefly before was I was a bookkeeper and this was before computers. I've been around a long time, so computers are new to me, and anyway, it was hand bookkeeping, and all of a sudden I was put into the position of the office manager. And like I said, I didn't know why. I guess I never had the courage to ask why either. But it was sort of an interesting experience to think that all of a sudden they just say you're going to do this, but with no whys or wherefores. That was also the first position I had that I had to let somebody go, that I had to fire somebody. And that's in the corporate world, that's one of the challenges with being in a leadership position, because sometimes you have to do things that's very difficult. And I'll share that story with you briefly. The branch manager was leaving for the day, and it was a Friday afternoon, about mid afternoon, and he comes into my office and says, "Before you leave today, fire so and so." He didn't give me a reason to say why or anything. He just said, "Well, I knew why though. I knew we were always having trouble. She was a bookkeeper and we were always having trouble balancing her books." But still, I was not given any instructions at all, and I had never dealt with it, had to do that before. So at a little bit before 5 o'clock, I called her in my office and I told her, I'm going to have to let you go. And I started crying. Not her, but I started crying. And after after we were through with our conversation and she left, when she walked through the bookkeeping department to get to the front door, she said, "I felt so." She told the ladies there, "I felt so sorry for Pauline." And I thought, oh my gosh, I had to do the firing, and she was being fired and she felt sorry for me because it was an emotional thing for me. So anyway, that's that. I'm not saying that's the way I would ever recommend anybody doing anything like that, but just for you to think about it. Um, the other the other situation I would like to think about, why did I get those promotions? And I think part was being considerate and thoughtful of my coworkers. And if you're considerate and thoughtful of your coworkers, are the people that you're joining it together in, whether it's a nonprofit or whether it's Toastmasters or whether it's WOVI. If you are thoughtful and you compliment them and show your appreciation and you listen to them, one of the key elements of leadership is listening. And you listen to what they have to say, because listening is a sign of respect, and everybody wants to be respected. So you listen to them, and it makes all the difference in the world. And compliment somebody when it's a word they deserve it. I don't mean you just compliment them out of the blue for nothing that they've done, but when they do something of value, make sure that whether you are their coworker or whether you're their manager, make sure you compliment them on their work. That makes all the difference in the world. Appreciate them, and be open, and more importantly, like I said a few minutes ago, listen to them. Listen to them. In my Toastmasters experience, I have to share this. When I was a really new Toastmaster, I think I had been a Toastmaster. I don't think I'd been a Toastmaster a year yet, but my club that I was a member of was a weekly club, so we elected officers every 6 months. So it was the second 6 month period of that club, and I was finishing up that term, and I'd been president. And I get a call from a gentleman I do not know, and introduces himself and tells me what he's doing. He's running for the office of district. We called it district governor back in the olden days, but district director. And he said this: "I've been told that you would be a very good area governor." And so, wow, who's telling him, but still, I mean, that thought, what a great approach. And so I said, well, I need to think about this. I hadn't seen our area governor that club hadn't visited us much, and I hadn't seen it, so I didn't really know what an area governor did. But anyway, I said, let me think about it, and I'll get back with you. So I thought about it a day, and I called him and said, yes, I think I'd like to do that. And about a week later, I get a call from a young woman, and she starts the phone call with, "Oh, Pauline, I didn't know you were interested in being an area governor." Well, I didn't either. Until Ernie was that guy's name, until Ernie had offered it to me. And she was running for they were both running for the same position. And so she was looking for area governors. And then I also said, well, I would, if I were an area governor, I'd like to have the area my club is in. I didn't tell her that yet. But she said, I've already given your area to somebody else, but I've got other areas. And I thought, well, I don't want other areas. I would only want the area my club is in. Not that that was necessary, but it was just my youthful experience in Toastmasters that made me think, well, I want to have the area that I'm a part of. And her apologizing that she'd already given it to somebody else and saying she didn't know I was interested in being an area governor. It made me think, well, somebody else, I didn't either, but somebody else convinced me that that's something I should do. So I found that an interesting thing. And then when the business meeting came along and Ernie was elected the district director, that's when I knew and started learning leadership by observation. And I think that's another thing that's very important. Watch existing leaders that you feel do things well and are respected by their peers and the people they lead, because you can learn so much through observation. But anyway, one of the first things that Ernie did as a leader was this was before the days of email and stuff like that. See, I'm from back in the olden days, so to speak. So this was before email. And so I would get a note card in the mail from him thanking me for what the work I was doing. And I would get a call from him on a regular basis, not saying how things going. And because I was diligent in my position and tried hard to do a good job, he kept giving me other new clubs that I could add to my area. So I think my area ended up with 9 clubs by the end of the year, which it started out with 4, I think, or 4 or 5. But anyway, but I learned so much from this man. He was just he did leadership right. And so that's another thing. See somebody whom you respect and others respect and observe what they do, and how they lead and the difference that their leadership makes. So I think in general, the promotions I got in that first company that I worked for any length of time was because I was thoughtful and appreciative and considerate of others, but also diligent. Worked when the work had to be done. I worked. Hmm. So the wonderful thing about Toastmasters is I'm going to throw this in, is we learn very much through observation. We get to watch people all the time in our club. We learn just a variety of things, not just leadership, but so many other things. And so when you're learning from through observation, make the most of those opportunities and embrace those things that you are learning. I think that the other thing that's critical in leadership is to compliment. One little compliment goes a long way. And if you're in a leadership position and you compliment somebody, you've got power there that you're using. And so it's even more meaningful, I will say, because I think about that district director when I was there, governor, and and how he complimented me and made me want to work all the harder because he was so appreciative. And so, make a difference in people's lives, uh, no matter what position you have, by complimenting. If you don't have a leadership position, your coworkers or the other members of your Toastmasters club or other members of WOVI, compliment them and appreciate them and be open. And there's one other important element of leadership that we must never forget, and that is to listen. Listening is a powerful tool. When we listen to others, we're showing respect, we're showing appreciation, and we're also learning. So to listen is a critical element in communication and a twice critical element in leadership. So why would one want to be in a leadership position? That's my question I would just think about a minute. Why would I mean, my question to myself. Well, some people want to be in a leadership position because they want to make a difference where they work or in other people's lives, or they want to learn more about leadership and that gives them the opportunity. And so with that thought in mind, if you have the opportunity, listen and learn from others. Observe whomever you respect around you who's in a leadership position. Listen to them and observe their actions and see the reaction to the people that they make a difference with. I always listened well at work. I don't always listen well in Toastmasters or in WOVI. I don't tell anybody I said that. But I always listened well at work, and I would have people that would come and sit in front of my desk just for me to listen to them. And that ranged from people who were my peers to the bosses. So when you listen well, it's a primary action of leadership that makes a huge difference. Because when you listen to somebody, you make them feel respected, and we all want respect. So one key element of leadership, whether it's through listening or other ways, other things, show respect for people in general, and that gives you more than you can imagine. And I think it's an interesting thing. I'm a talker, and I'm don't hesitate about talking to strangers. And my kids, when my kids were teenagers, we moved. My husband was military, and we moved frequently, and so they would have to make new friends. And that when they would make new friends, and then they'd bring them home for me to meet them, and they had warned their friends ahead of time. My mother asked a lot of questions. Well, to me, my asking a lot of questions was showing interest in the kids my children were friends with. But also, I was curious. But I'm that way even today about others. I mean, I ask a lot of questions. I want to know about people. I'm interested in them. And I think that's a positive thing from the perspective that if I'm showing interest in them, they feel good about it. It makes them feel like they are of value. So be prepared to listen and be prepared with the questions that you can ask. What kind of, course, you can't ask any question nowadays. There are some questions that are a little bit more, you have to be more careful with, but in general, most people like to talk about themselves. Even somebody that's shy sometimes finds out that if somebody will ask them a question, they'll answer it and feel good about it. So when you listen to somebody, it's a sign of respect and interest and a variety of things. So, consider that tool, listening, a very important, powerful leadership tool. And especially if you have a team you're leading, listen to the members of that team, because their job is to help you, or your job is to lead them, and you can do that more effectively if you listen to them. Never, I'm gonna say never, but never slough somebody off. If you're in the middle of something and you don't feel like you can give it the time to listen to them, make an appointment with them to come back and give them the time they deserve. And that's true of anybody, whether it's you're a team member, or whether it's a coworker on the same level you are, or even whether it's your supervisor or your manager. Listen and show that you're listening, because listening is such a sign of respect. It's another one of those critical issues of leadership. I thought, to me, leadership was such an interesting thing. I didn't really know, I had a high opinion about what leadership meant when I got into my first leadership position, and it was eons ago. But I didn't, I wasn't knowledgeable about leadership, but I was just using my personality, which had a tendency to be interested in people and want to know more about them and to appreciate them. So I think that's something for good leadership, you need to consider, that showing your interest in others, whether they're your teammate, a team, somebody you lead, or whether it's somebody who leads you, sh- show interest in them, and that it's a double sign of respect. The other thing that I would like to share about what do you think about? I mean, what is important to you? What do you think makes you tick, or makes you who you are? What is your personality? What is it that makes you you, that might be different from somebody else? And how do you make the most of that? Because what uniqueness you have can make a difference with whatever you do. So look at yourself as much as you can. It's not easy to do, I admit, but look at yourself and think, what is it that I do, or I act, or I say, that could make a difference in somebody else? And it doesn't mean you get too personal, but you get as personal as you can, that you feel that they feel comfortable with, but you show interest in others, and that's critical. I I think it's interesting how different people react, and what the results are. One of the things that made me compelled, I will say, to start Women of Visionary Influence was that when I was international president of Toastmasters, and women hadn't been in that position but one other year besides me, and so I was sort of unique. And the young women would come up to me and they would say, "Oh, Pauline, you're my mentor." And what they really meant was I was their role model, because we weren't having a mentor protege interaction, or mentee interaction. It was just I was somebody they looked up to. But it made me think about women, and I know we're not all women in the audience today, but it made me think about women, and this is true of men too. Men and women both deserve to be listened to, they deserve respect, and if you respect them, you earn their respect. It's a give and take situation, not give and take, but it means all the difference in the world. So that's an important element of leadership. And the other thing that I learned that was critical is you keep everybody informed. When you think about, when I was district governor of District 25, that was before the split. I kept everybody informed. I mean, I didn't just go communicate with my leadership team. I communicated with every club because every club and every club member was important. And so that's the thing to look at. Everybody that's in your team or in your focus or in your area of responsibility is important, and you want them to feel important, because when they feel important, they're more confident and they perform better. And once in a while you do get a situation, excuse me, a situation that that person doesn't deserve that. And that's a tough thing to deal with. It's idealistic to think I'm going to sit down that person. I don't like the way that person is influencing negatively this team. And it's challenging to deal with that, but that's a responsibility of a leader. So you before it becomes a serious problem, you just in some cases you just confront it, and in other cases you need to be more delicate in handling it. But that leadership requires that you do what needs to be done, whether it's the easy thing or not. And we grow. And I will go back to my before I started my position of district governor. I thought to myself, everything I've done in Toastmasters so far, I've uh, I've given myself a goal. What am I going to learn from serving in this position? And so before I went into the district governor position, district director position, I decided I would work on handling conflict, because I hate conflict, and I don't. It's the bane of my existence, I guess you could say. But conflict happens. That's just the way it is. And as I generally say when I mention this, I had my opportunities to manage conflict. When you've got that many people you're dealing with, and it's amazing when you handle something well. And I'm not saying I always did that, but there were two serious areas of conflict that happened the year I was district governor, and both of them I just confronted the situation, just went right into it and said, you can't do that. And in both cases, the people that I had to, I guess, tell them to back off, or tell them they couldn't do what they were wanting to do, they both became close friends. And years later, I heard from one of them, and he said something about what a wonderful year that was and what a wonderful experience. And he was the only area governor I had that I had to sit down and say, you can't do that. And that was harder than on me, I think, than it was on him. But still, if you don't take care of those problems, others see it as a weakness, a leadership weakness, and that takes away your power. But more importantly, something happens that shouldn't happen, and you are in control of that, so you have to be responsible for it. So leadership is not all fun and games. I will say it that way. It requires some tough stuff, but that's the way it is. You if you want to be a leader, and if you are a leader, you got to hit the tough stuff, but you also got to remain considerate and be complimentary, and don't step on others' toes. That's another thing that I made a comment, made myself a note about. And observe people whom you respect. If you have a boss you respect, and you would like to have a position similar to the one that boss holds, do one of two things. Just observe and pay them compliments of respect. so that they know that you're learning from them, or ask them to be your mentor. I'm going to go back to the beginning of WOVI a minute. I have to spend a few minutes on that, although I think I'm about run out of my time having it. I think I have. I will tell that story, finish that story, and then I will open for questions and answers. Uh, when hearing those women say that to me, I thought, there's something missing in women's lives, and I think it's mentoring. So that's why they got that thought about an organization for women that provided mentoring. That needs to happen. Women need to have a mentor. They want a mentor. They deserve a mentor. So that's how WOVI came about. It just kept rolling around in my brain until okay, it's time. I got to do this. So you learn so much along the way in so many ways. But anyway, now I think I have the opportunity to open it up. For want to thank you for listening to me as I've rambled on leadership. But leadership is a love in my life, and I think it's easier to be a leader than people think. And so, with that thought in mind, I will open up now for questions that I hope I can answer.